Now let's create this little firework, and I'm going to do it in a way where it's actually not as much work as you would think. So here's actually what the firework looks like. And I just used one of these, and then I used a hue and saturation effect to adjust the colors in this original one and the size so that, I can kind of just duplicate it and it looks better. Okay, so let's create a new comp. I'm just going to make it a square comp, 1000 by 1000, and I'll call this firework 2. Okay, so these are all going in the for lesson folder for you to follow along if you want. Do you remember using the repeater tool earlier? Well, if you didn't, let me show you how to do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is use my pen tool to create a little line. So I'm going to turn off my fill. So click fill and choose none. And then for the stroke, I'll start with 10. We'll see how that goes. Now I want to make sure I create this line in the very center of this composition. So let me zoom in here really close. Then with the pen tool, just click once and then shift click up. And there we have our line. I think it's a little bit too big. So let me set this, or too thick, something like 5. And then let's just tab it over. And if we zoom out, yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now when I do this and I drop down our shape contents, click add, and then click repeater, what happens is it adds these 3 points of our firework. For this first one, I'm going to drop down the repeater and add 8 points. Then I'm going to drop down our transform properties, change our position to 0. So it's all starting from the 0 point, so that's all right there. And then I'm going to change the rotation and rotate it around to 45. And if you remember from the other lesson, when you're using the repeater effect and you want things to spread out like a fan perfectly around the same point like this, you want to make sure that you create it along and in the center of your composition. You change your position to 0, and then you change your rotation to 360 divided by the number of copies, right? So 360 divided by 8 is 45. Now what happens is if we animate our shape 1, that same animation happens to all of these other points. So let me just show you. So say I take my transform properties for shape 1 and I move it out. Whoa, that is pretty cool. So let me fit this up to 100. So what's going to happen is we want it to come out from the center and pop out like that and then fade away. So let's set our position to 0 and set a keyframe. And then go to 1 second and take our position out to say right there. So now we have this animation. Now we just have to fade it on and off. So set a keyframe for 0 opacity. Here we can set a opacity for 100, maybe just a couple frames later. So it comes on and then it fades off. So at the end, it's going to be 100 to 0. So maybe here we'll set it to 100. So see that? The position goes up and then it fades on, stays on, and then it fades off. Now we can play with the motion of the position and the speed by adding easy ease, selecting those keyframes and pressing F9, and then going into the graph editor. And then when you think about a firework, how does it move? The explosion is really fast, so it goes really fast from the start, and then it sort of slows down into the end motion. So let's take this last one and drag it to the left. So it ramps up, and let's take this one in even further. See that? It's more of an explosion like that. I like that a lot. And maybe we want our fade to be a little bit longer, so let's bring in this to like half a second. Nice, I like that. So basically we do this and then we replicate or duplicate these things. And so first let's actually change the color of the shape 1. So if we select shape 1 and choose like a highlighter sort of red, that looks good. And if we group these, so click add group, make sure this group is outside of the shape 1 and put shape 1 and repeater within the group. And now we can just duplicate the group. So if I duplicate this group, right now it's happening at the same time. So I have to shift these keyframes to the right. Or another thing I can do first though, just to see how it looks, is go into the group 2 settings, go into the repeater settings, and for this one I want to have more things shoot out. So maybe I want 12. And when I change that to 12, I have to change the transform properties of the repeater. So 360 divided by 12 is simple math, calculator, simple math, not my cup of tea. 360 divided by 12 is 30. Da, da, da. Okay, and then let's change the color. So if I select the shape in group 2 and change the color to like green, something like that, that's cool. So that's cool. These come out at the same time, and that actually looks pretty cool, all happening at once. Or I can rotate it, or I can rotate the group itself. So if I go into the transform group 2 settings, I can rotate it to make sure I see all of the green, because before some of the green was hiding the red. So I might want to rotate it just a little bit, like so. That's pretty cool. Okay, so that's cool, but maybe I want to stagger it a little bit. So what I want to do is press U on my keyboard. I know that the shape 1 down below is the first one, and this top one is the second one. So if I take these keyframes from the top one and drag them to the right, I can offset just a little bit. Maybe a little bit later. That's pretty cool. Okay, so let's close this down and go into our groups. Duplicate group 2 one more time. Go into the repeater settings. Actually, first let's just press U and offset just a little bit more. And then go back into the settings, and we're going to change the color of the shape. So let's change the color to maybe like a blue, light highlighter blue, kind of very saturated. And then let's go into the repeater effect, and let's do, how about 24? Lots. So then 360 divided by 24 would be 15. So under the repeater settings, we want the rotation to be 15. So now that's lots. So that's pretty cool. And it happens a little late, so let's drag this in. Cool, so that's pretty cool. Now you can adjust the length of this, you can repeat this, you can create more, maybe make it a little slower. Let me take all of these keyframes, drag to the right just a little bit. That's pretty cool. Maybe I want to stagger them just a little bit more. That's pretty cool. Maybe I want to add rotation to the whole thing. So if I rename this firework, then press R, this is the rotation for this whole composition, or this whole shape layer itself. So if I set a keyframe for 0 and put that at the very beginning, and then I change it and drag this to after everything fades away, the whole thing rotates, which is kind of cool. Adds a little bit more to it. Cool, so now we can take these fireworks and put them in our Swiss Alps composition. So take firework 2, put it behind our cabin, and then if we drag through, we can see when it happens. And depending on if we want it in front of the trees or not, we would actually have to disenable the Shy Guy button and put this behind the trees. Maybe we want it behind the trees. That might look a little bit better. This is the moon. Let's rename this the moon. Okay. It's a little too big though, so let's scale it down. And now it's in the sky like that. That's pretty cool, but we want to see it kind of fly up. So see how this one, you see the little dot, it flies up. I think that's important. So what we're going to do in our firework is actually tab this over to the right, or move the whole shape layer to the right. And then before this starts to explode on, and we just want a little dot in the middle of this frame. So I'm just going to take our ellipse tool, set the fill option to white, turn off the stroke, and then create a little circle and center it using the align tools. Okay. So that might be a little too small, actually. You can barely even see it. So let's go in here and press scale, bring up the scale. It's coming from this anchor point, so I need to realign. That's pretty good. And then I want to take it off as soon as everything explodes. So right here, when things start to explode, I'm going to cut this. So option right bracket and put this beneath our firework layer. So it explodes, and as it explodes, it disappears. And I might need to actually take this over to like 1 second so I have more space to work with, because we're going to animate the position of this so it's flying up. So here is where it starts to explode at 1 second. So we want it to be in the air at this point. So press P on your keyboard to bring up position. And then I'm going to go backwards to 1, 0, and drag it down. And I'm going to drag it down below our ground. So it comes up and explodes. So let's play this to see how the speed is. That's pretty cool, but I want to easy ease these and ease it into the top part, because again, it's shooting off like a rocket. It's really fast in the beginning, and then it slows down to its final spot. Boom. Yeah, that's what a firework looks like. Cool, so now we have this all animated. What I can do to quickly duplicate this is duplicate it, so Command D. I can offset it just a little bit, so drag this layer to the right. And now to move it, I can't adjust the position easily because I would have to adjust both these position keyframes, but I can use my anchor point for this layer, pressing A to bring up anchor point and dragging it to the left or right. Now that looks cool, but I want to, just make it a little bit different. So I'll drag down and also make it a little bit bigger, for example. So playing with the size and the position. So that's cool, but it's the exact same colors. So let's change up the colors. An easy way to do that is with the hue saturation effect. So if you type in hue under color correction, you have hue and saturation, and I'll drag that onto firework and then drag the hue, master hue dial to the right. Maybe I want to bring up all my colors right there so I see them until I get something I like. Maybe something like, that's kind of cool. Boom, boom, boom. So that's pretty cool. And let me just do this one more time. So I'm going to duplicate this last one I did, which already has the hue saturation filter on it. Drag it to the right, the layer, so it happens a little bit later. Then press A to bring up our anchor point. Now let's put this behind over here. Actually, I'm going to put this in front of the trees. So let me disenable the shy guy, put it in front of the trees. Make it a little bit smaller. A, and bring it up higher. Something like that. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, let me extend this so I see the whole firework show that we're creating. Nice. And let's change the hue and saturation of this. So change the hue to something different. Nice. That is looking pretty darn cool. Now it's a little different than our original one, but that's okay. This one's a little slower. This one had, I think, 4 explosions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it had 4 explosions for the firework. So you can see how you can quickly add that, though, if I wanted to add another one in here. And that would affect everything in this layer because it's all pre-comped. Cool, so that's how we create this layer. And then the last thing we're gonna do is export this, which is, I'll show you in the exporting and saving section of this class. So I'm gonna take this composition that I created, the cabin one, and actually export it right within that section. So go ahead and watch that lecture so that you know how to export your own video, and then you can post it online and share it with us to see. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in another lecture.